that I completed a PhD. That was quite the feat.
Ah, uh-huh.
Focusing on ancestral law, our language, as a as the primary resource, and
Oh,
looking at how we define transformation. And I'm a registered clinical counselor and did spiritual director training and SE training and everything and anything that would help along the healing journey.
I'm Lynn Fraser with the Kiloby Center for Recovery, and I'm really happy to introduce Patricia Vickers. She works with the First Nations Health Authority in Vancouver Island, British Columbia, and she's done the somatic experiencing training through Peter Levine's organization. She's developed 2 trauma training programs as a clinical therapist. And Patricia, why don't you go ahead and just start by introducing yourself and talking a little bit about what it is that you do and how you see your role and what it is that you do around healing trauma and addictions in particular.
Okay, sure. I'm from the village of Gitkatla. My father was from the Killer Whale clan, and his mother was from Gitkatla. His father hailed sick from Bella Bella. My mother was an English woman, and she went to Gitkatla as a missionary and taught there. Excuse me. And they met and married, and so I have 4 brothers and 1 sister. My mother was adopted as an eagle, and I carry the name Zagamdachsk, which is an eagle name. Um, I completed a PhD at the University of Victoria, an interdisciplinary PhD where I focused on the transformative aspects of ancestral law. We call it the Ayao, and I did that looking at our sacred stories. They're called a Dao, and I met with fluent speakers from Gitkatla, and just to ensure that I was interpreting it correctly, because I was going to Robert Bainen's writings. He assisted Franz Boas, in his work in uh, in the Tsimshian area. Yeah, I would say that's that. Those are some of the things that I've done,
Mhm.
and where I'm from, where my roots are.
Yeah, thank you. What is the First Nations Health Authority? Can you kind of situate that in the Canadian medical system and what it is that you do with them?
Yes, so it's the only health organization in Canada where the First Nations chiefs from all of the communities in BC agreed to create the First Nations Health Authority, and in partnership with the province and the federal government. So before that, we were all under federal health. And so now it's with the First Nations Health Authority where we're determining our own direction for what health and wellness means. So I'm in one of the departments. I'm in mental health and wellness. So there are other departments as well that are about um, health and well-being and community. So environment, housing, um, all of the medical issues, so hospitals and primary care and um, health nurses in our communities, our remote communities.
Mhm.
All of that is covered by, and dental covered by First Nations Health Authority now.
Oh, okay. And that's just in British Columbia?
Yes,
Right, right.
it's a tripartite agreement.
Okay. So what kind of what difference has it made? Why was it set up? I guess in part, um, although that might be a little bit of an obvious answer to that. But what kinds of issues are being helped by having that that council, that health authority?
I think one of the significant ones is collectively what we're doing is a self inquiry. it's a very young organization. So
Mhm,
we're having a look at where we've come from
mhm,
and how that's impacted us and conditioned us, and where we are now. And in mental health, which is the area that I'm in, what is it that we need to heal? What are the people saying? Have they been saying? What are they continuing to say? And how do we meet that need? Which is um, which is really different to what it was before.
mhm.
We're actually in the communities.
Right. So
And
it's not a top down, this is what we're delivering.
right, right.
Right.
And we have 5 regions,
Mhm,
and each region has an executive director and a mental health and wellness team. So
mhm.
really, my position is there to serve the 5 regions and mainly the communities and what the communities ask for.
Ah, okay. And so let's talk about residential schools because that's something that is unique to Indigenous people in Canada. I know it's happened in other places as well, but there's um, there's a unique set of trauma that's happened with colonization and with the residential schools in particular. Can you outline that for people who aren't very familiar with that?
Oh, um, so I'm just trying to think of the best approach to outline it. I'm a
Okay.
clinician
Mhm.
and also different ceremonies from different nations really has helped me a whole lot in healing. It's my personal history, and if you're Indigenous, it's your personal history. So
Right.
that's why the pause. Um, I would say that it's a really dark force in our history where um, atrocities happen to children for too long.
Mhm,
And where we saw, for me, it was my grandmother. Her father didn't go to residential school. He was born in the 1800s. She was born in the late 1800s. And so um, she attended and my father attended. So it's an intergenerational experience as well of conditioning to inferiority, to non human existence. So, not even an animal existence, really.
mhm,
It's, it's about who you are is not acceptable. And so, um, I think right now what we're seeing is a real emphasis in healing is identity.
mhm,
And then eventually, for those of us who've been in recovery for some time, we begin to ask ourselves, well, what is identity?
mhm,
Um, so um, I would say that if we look at fight, flight, freeze, we've been in a state of collapse for some time,
mhm,
which is lower than the freeze state, and that we're through collective self inquiry. I think that we're really becoming aware of that and beginning to orient ourselves to say what is it that we need to recover from really unspeakable wrongdoing against children for generations.
mhm,
So, and the atrocities include physical violence and starvation and experimentation. Um, it also included death, where children were buried in unmarked graves.
mhm,
It includes a history of a male and a female, either child being raped over and over again by different people who are in authority, different positions of authority within an institution. So we have intergenerational institutionalized, who people who have been institutionalized,
Right.
and that institution really is about um, is about a non-human way of living, which means a lack of compassion and kindness and understanding and safety and protection and all of the things that a child really needs.
Hmm. And the intergenerational movement of that through families as well. Um, we under
Yes.
we understand when a parent is so traumatized that it's not possible for the child to have a secure experience as a child either.
Well, and as a child, I didn't understand that really,
Right.
you know. And as children, we don't.
We
We
don't.
don't understand um, why are one parent's absent and the other parent is sexualizing you.
Right.
There's no way of understanding that. You just know that something's gone wrong
Right.
and
Yeah.
that it's a dark presence. You know, now I see, oh, well, it wasn't only with my father, it was a presence that went back a number of generations.
Right.
Yeah, and that's why it was so dark.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And there are so many people who are living in that existence today,
Right.
or
There's
else they've committed suicide, or else they're on alcohol or drugs in order to live. Really,
mhm.
yeah,
It's really difficult to be present with something that dark and painful. Yeah.
mm. But we have to be, you know, and this is where um, our our unity in love and compassion and all that our ancestral principles hold for us, the teachings and the sacred stories and the songs, as well as other religious practices, you know, because we're a part of a larger world. And
Right.
so the commonalities really that bring us together, you know, we need each other to do this, whether it's myself and my siblings,
Mhm.
or myself and my friends who have their own religious practices, or you know, or as a professional to be working with the province um, and the services that they have. We It's really important for us to be united because it is so dark.
Right. Yes. Yeah. So, can you talk a little bit about your own healing journey? I know you're an artist too, and
Yes.
what part does that play?
Well, I grew up actually watching my older brother, who's I'd call him a traditional Northwest Coast artist. So
Mhm.
I was fortunate to watch him as he moved along. I was in my teens, but also my grandparents were a really big part of my childhood. My father's parents, they
Mhm.
would come and live with us during the winter months, and that's when I heard Somalia being spoken, and they told stories. And my grandfather, in particular, really knew how to. He knew how to laugh, and his humor was usually about crazy things that he'd done, or dumb things, or stupid things. You
Mhm.
know, so he laughed at himself,
Uh-huh.
and he wove it all together in a way that was really a teaching that caused you to relax as you were listening and not really knowing that you were learning something that you would recall much later on.
Uh-huh.
So I would say all of that is influenced a need to find a way to express um, the goodness and the healing and what healing is, you know,
Mhm.
because often words fail us. And so that's where I find it's really helpful to have a medium or a number of different mediums where I can express the healing that I'm going through today, and
Mhm.
to have it connect to my siblings and my ancestors is, when that happens, it feels like magic.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So, did you draw and paint and create art from a very early age?
No, no, it didn't really start to come for me until I was in my mid 30s, and I was sewing, and I did that. I have 4 children, and so I think, like a lot of women who are my age, we made our children's clothes, and we made toys for them, and quilts for them, and that sort of thing. So I was working with color through from about my mid 20s,
Mhm.
that's what got me into painting. Was I wanted to learn how to use color more effectively,
Ah.
and I took a watercolor class with Leslie Barnwell, and an artist in the Kispiox Valley, and
Mhm.
I just
Yeah. Cool.
I really liked it.
Yeah.
So that was the late '80s. So I've been painting since then.
Wow. Mm.
It helps me a lot. Yeah.
Right. So there's a there's the cognitive mind and the understanding we need to have, and then there's the creative process and our body. What drew you to do the somatic experiencing training?
I I have dissociative amnesia, and it was through EMDR, and in my mid 30s at the Meadows, it was inner child work
Mhm.
that connected me with the experience of incest with my father.
Oh.
And I didn't actually trust it because I thought, well, how do I know that that's true? But
Mhm.
my body um, was was telling me that it was true, and in my mind I couldn't actually accept it. So for quite some time I knew that I was struggling, and in 2007 when I found out I had dissociative amnesia, I thought I need to approach this from the body. And
Uh,
so I took, well, I started the training, and I searched. I was working as a clinician with Vancouver Coastal Health Authority at the time,
mhm.
and I needed some other way to work with the Indigenous clients that I was working with, because I found CBT just wasn't enough, nor
Mhm.
was the inner child, the altered state of consciousness work. I needed something else. And
Mhm.
so I began the SE training in 2010.
Mhm.
And the brain, the beginner's one, I found was fascinating. And so the more I took, the more I began to understand myself.
Uh,
And it was incredibly valuable. It was a challenge for me because I found the language was similar to that in university, um, where you have domination language that people generally aren't aware of. You're just conditioned into it. For example, the therapist is the expert,
right.
and I'm going to create space when space is something that exists and we enter into it like a
Yeah.
sacred ceremony.
Mhm.
The sweat lodge holder or the MC at the feast doesn't create the space. It already exists and we enter into it. So
Mm.
just things like that of seeing relationships and seeing the world, I was discovering through taking the training there that I thought differently. And so I began to get curious about how I was conditioned to think. And so that um, reconnected me to the doctoral studies. I just kept coming back to what the fluent speakers had taught me and what I learned through that study. it was coming alive. I completed
Right.
in
Right.
2008.
Okay.
It
Mhm.
was a long journey. And then, the practice and the life of it coming, waking up inside of you.
Mhm. Mm.
So I think that SE was really, really good training because it brought me to the neuroscience of
Right.
PTSD. Yeah.
Mhm.
And to looking at dissociative amnesia from that place. And eventually, after my nervous system almost crashed in 2 years ago, I knew I had to find some modality to access the information that I knew was perfectly stored in my brain, but I couldn't access it with my mind. And I
Mhm.
had colleagues, psychologists, Ulrich Lanius, Ruth Lanius's brother,
Oh,
and Stephen Milstein. They're two psychologists here in Vancouver, and um, and they said you need to do lens, and and it, that it was specifically for lifting the lid off repression, and abruptly. So they were great, and it was 3 months of intensive recalling and accessing that memory.
oh. So
Yeah,
dissociative amnesia, can you just say a little bit about what that is?
sure. Because a child is raped so many times, they're leaving my their I left my body so many times
Mm.
that eventually what the brain did was just didn't allow access. It's a thing that the brain does all on its own. It's an involuntary response to an intolerable reality.
Right. So it's
Yeah.
protective.
Yes. Yeah.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
And then when it became important for you to access those memories, did they come forward?
I access them through Lens, and um, since it's very slow, it's a very slow process. And now I'm doing neurofeedback with Mind Clinic. I do it on a weekly basis,
Mhm.
and um, the brain is amazing.
Yeah. Yeah. It
It is
is.
absolutely amazing,
Mhm.
and I I think that when you were talking about me painting, that it's we're looking for a way to integrate it. If you look at Dan Siegel's work, he talks a lot about how important that integration is,
Mhm.
because that's where acceptance is and peace
Right.
is. And for me, I've wanted to know what it is I'm accepting. And so when you have dissociative amnesia, you just really have your body in the moment to converse with.
Right. So
So I've had a couple of spontaneous memories, where it was just really clear, and you have the whole memory, what room you were in, what was happening before and after. It's the whole memory.
oh,
Whereas when the brain is being bombarded with this low emission, really, so that it won't do what it normally does, and that's deny access.
mhm.
And I had access to memory. It was like, I want to say, it was like a foot impression in the sand, where there was this memory, and I was saying the memories as they were coming. But I noticed after about 3 months of doing this that I had no emotion.
Oh,
And so the Steve said, "Well, that's because you're dissociated, and that's why you have no physiological response as well. As it's because you're dissociated.
mhm.
So this time when we hook you up, be open to what your emotions are, and be fully in your body as you go in. Wow, it's amazing. I would call that intention, you know.
Right. Right.
So how powerful intention is, because it allows us to be present.
Right.
So I'm curious about others who have dissociative amnesia, because I haven't met anyone where I could have this conversation with,
Hmm.
and they know what I'm talking about,
Right.
and we
Right.
can talk about what it's like to live with it and what we're doing to heal.
Hmm.
I think we need more networks like this
Right.
one that you're creating for
Yes.
healing and wellness.
Hmm. Hmm. And really go deeply into the trauma and healing of the trauma and how that works in our body, and really
Yes,
all the way through.
yeah.
Yeah.
Knowing the truth, living in reality, not illusion. Yeah.
Right. Right. So the work that you've been doing to heal in your own body. So this has been happening the last few years, but before that you did the somatic experiencing training.
Yes, and I found that with the dissociative amnesia, it didn't do what I needed.
Ah, I see.
Yeah, yeah,
Right. So your brain was still protecting you from
yes.
really being fully in your body or fully feeling the emotions.
The emotions were there,
Okay.
in relationships, um, and so was presence. It's the relationship with the past, with memory.
Ah, okay.
Yeah.
Right. Right. Mm. What a loss too, that I mean, it's wonderful that the brain steps in to protect us. And what a loss that so much of the life isn't remembered. Yeah.
Well, I have memory in other areas of
Yeah.
childhood. Yeah.
Yeah. But not that.
For example, I remember when I was 5 and we were living in Hazelton, it's Gibson territory, and I recall, I could go anywhere. I could roam anywhere, and we were in a rural area,
Hmm.
and one of my favorite places to go to is I'd walk to the stream, which wasn't very far away, maybe a couple of 100 meters, and down a dirt road.
Hmm.
And then I'd walk beside the stream bed to the beaver pond.
Ah. Hmm.
And in the summertime, the smell there was incredibly sweet.
Hmm. Hmm.
And the sun shining through the alder and birch trees was, yeah, it was a beautiful green canopy.
Hmm.
So I have those memories. I have memories of catching a bumblebee with my hands.
Wow.
And what happens when you do that?
Yeah, you probably got stung.
Yeah, I did.
Yeah.
Yeah, so picking chocolate lilies for my mother for Mother's Day.
uh,
So a lot in nature.
right. Right.
Yeah. And now I know why I have those memories, because I needed those times in order to really live and to know what to be in my body.
Right.
And nature has some true beauty.
Hmm.
Yeah. Lessons too in the wintertime when you get cold, you know. Yeah.
Yeah. That reality thing again.
Right. Right.
Yeah. Yeah. So, can you describe a little bit about the trauma programs that you've developed? What are some of the elements of that?
Yes. There are two at this point in time. One's a 3-week immersion program, and I consulted with Bessel van der Kolk and Gabor Mate for that, asking them what they thought the best elements for a training program would be. And
Mhm.
Bessel said, what art therapy, anything that helps a person to be in their body experiencing and they don't have to narrate it. So,
Uh,
where we have no language for what it is we're experiencing.
mhm,
And then, of course, Gabor, when you look at his work in the realm of hungry ghosts and about a compassionate response to how people survive with trauma.
right.
So we had art therapy, qigong, um, traditional brushing, and then there are two who are in their 70s who survived Indian residential school,
Mhm,
and they're still fluent in Secwepemc, and they usually they open with a prayer song. They're
mhm,
both ceremonial people,
mhm,
and so we have it is rooted and grounded in our ancestral teachings,
mhm.
but mainly what we're doing is we're focusing on the neurobiology of trauma. So the morning starts with a lecture and discussion around that,
Mhm.
and then group therapy, so they have a chance to experience a somatic approach to therapy.
Mhm.
And we also do empty chair work and other, let's say, altered state of consciousness practices or methods.
Mhm.
And then art therapy ends the morning. People
Mhm.
come in and they pull together what it was that they learned about themselves and others for the morning. And then we repeat the same thing for the afternoon.
Right.
And we've delivered that to 4 of 5 regions. And about 90% of the participants in their evaluation said that it helped with their healing and that it needs to continue and that they want more. They want level 2 of the training and they want a training in sexual trauma. So they're,
Right.
the
Right.
participants are directing us. They're, we take 16 um, and no more. That's so we can have 8 per group with
Mhm.
2 therapists. And then there are 4 of us who are Indigenous.
Mhm.
The three men who are facilitators as well, and bring their traditional knowledge and experience to the program.
Mhm.
So we do that one. It's 3 weeks, 1 week on, 1 week off.
Mhm.
So the participants get a chance to work their methods and what they've learned with their clients. And then
Ah,
they come back in week 2 and then they have questions and this is working and I appreciated this. And
mhm.
so they said, this is the model that you need to keep
Mhm.
because we get a chance to practice and then come back.
Right. Right.
And then I developed a 3-day brief trauma training. And that one is like the 3 week, but there's no therapy. And we cover the neurobiology, actually, nonviolent communication on day one.
Mhm.
And they really appreciate that because, people are either in a fight
Mhm.
place or a
Yeah.
flight place. They're either blaming themselves and judging themselves or blaming someone else.
Right. Right.
So it's an opportunity to move out of that and learn how to communicate from a different place, from our authentic place, really, place of
Right.
understanding and compassion. And then days 2 and 3, we're covering the neurobiology and focusing on intergenerational trauma through Indian residential school.
Mhm.
And song, traditional song, and prayers in the language are all a part of that.
Right.
And again, the feedback is we need this to be delivered to all of the community and to elders and all of the Indian residential school survivors. So
Right. Right.
yes,
So, oh gosh, there's so much in there. Can you give a little bit more of an example of the first morning you were talking about with the 3 week course? You were
yes,
talking about the different elements of that. So there's some basic education around neurobiology.
yes.
And then can you just expand a little bit more on what happens after that?
Um, well, the discussion that happens the three right now, the three men, two Shikwatmik and one Tsimshian Gitsan, they were in the first delivery of the program. And so now they're facilitators.
Mhm.
And we've been revising the program as we move along.
Mhm.
And as we study research and who names that I'm hearing now, or I get referred to different people. So revisions have happened, and they've happened because of the feedback. But these three men actually play a significant part in the training,
Mhm.
and the discussion is critical because um, one of the facilitators, he said, I actually remember when he said, I've been in freeze my whole life. And I
Wow.
see it's because I went to residential school and that's where I first started to live life in freeze.
Yeah.
And he said, I'm thawing out.
And that
And
can
I'll never forget the look in his eyes,
Mhm.
of life,
Yeah.
and not anger and rage, just awakening to life and all that life has. No regret, just being in that moment. So I think that the dialogue is really, really critical in the when we're going over the neurobiology, because for me, I see it's important as I gained an understanding of the brain and that it was an involuntary response to horror.
Right.
I I said, "Oh, it's not because I'm dumb,
Yes. It takes some
or
of the blame.
stupid.
Yeah. Mhm.
I'm not an idiot."
Right. Yeah.
And it's because of what happened to me.
Yeah.
And
It's
my brain and my body and my mind just did what they needed to do to survive.
yeah. And you did survive.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm.
So that's why it's important to cover that in the training, is we
Right.
get to witness people waking up to that truth, and
Right.
it's beautiful. It's not
Mhm.
because we're stupid Indians or
Right.
we're insignificant as Indians. That's what we were called when I was a child, Indians.
Indians, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
So so that's a really important part, and then the rest of the day really is individuals exploring what that means for them
Mm.
and learning how to be compassionate with themselves.
So how does that work? I know that's a big struggle for people, self-compassion.
Um, we we talk ourselves about um, how we self sabotage
Mhm.
as facilitators, our own struggles with addiction,
Mhm.
and understanding that struggle. So it's not as though we're experts and we've arrived. Um, we're all on this healing pathway together, and we're
Right.
all learning and growing as we move along. And yeah, I think that helps to remember that. It's also our traditional teaching: one heart, one mind.
Ah. Mhm.
Yeah, yeah.
Mm.
And I think it's coming back to that, to our traditional teachings as well, that being unkind to ourselves really isn't following our principles and values.
Right.
It's simply following what we've come to believe about who we are
Right.
as individuals and as a people.
Mhm. I think that is one of the extra layers here that isn't necessarily the situation for, a white child who's experienced a lot of trauma. That you have that the whole culture and the discrimination and the stereotypes and how harmful they are. And then on as well as the residential schools and the horror.
Right.
Yeah.
And foster care. We've had a number of people who were in foster care in the 60s when the residential schools closed down, then it shifted over to apprehensions.
Right.
So we've had people find themselves and their ancestors in the training program. And that's amazing to witness because I wasn't fostered, and so I get to experience that reality through other people.
Right.
Yeah,
Hmm.
yeah. So there is that, and we can't forget about that, as well as whole communities being relocated because a dam was being built, or because there were resources on the land, or because the federal government didn't want the expense of servicing them, and so they were forced to move. So we have really, we're beginning to look at them now coming out of collective freeze, and we're beginning to understand how this history has impacted us,
Right.
and that's a good thing.
It's a good thing to do, to be present with that. Yeah. Is there a lot of
Mhm.
anger that comes out with that?
I think there has been for the last 25 or 30 years. And I would say through ceremony, through traditional ceremony and to ancestral principles and teachings, which are all essentially about the spirit world of compassion,
Mhm.
learning what love truly is, what safety truly is. Um, I think that that's what's helping us to shift, and we need to shift the shape of our present reality. We Anger's, the gift of anger is strength, and it helps for a while, but when it begins to move to blame and resentment,
Right.
it's time to own that,
Mhm.
and to look to our spiritual teachings to how to move.
Right. So you have a high rate of incarceration as well. And then people come back to the communities from all kinds of situations. Maybe they're in the cities and they come back to smaller communities. Or what's it like to for people individually and as well for the community to kind of reintegrate as people come home?
Well, I can look at my family. So my father was he was in jail a couple of Christmases for uh, drink. He was drunk while he was driving,
Mhm.
and um, and then because I reported him to the police when I found out he was sexually abusing my daughters. So
Oh,
he was incarcerated then, and really got no help.
right,
He was in a penitentiary for sex offenders, and really there was nothing for him.
right,
And so I think that we're the ones that have to make the change, and um, we the change that needs to happen is that essential understanding of the neurobiology of trauma, really.
right.
And I'm so grateful for what's happening in neuroscience. It's
Mhm.
it's it's tremendous, and I think when we have an understanding of involuntary response,
Mm,
then we can begin to be conscious about making choices. But
right,
but really, we need to approach that in all the many different angles there are through self-awareness activities that are happening in penitentiaries now. Yoga and meditation are two big ones,
mhm,
and sweat lodge ceremony.
Mhm.
So we're, I don't know that we're in a place in our communities yet where um, where it's about returning, and there being a process for when somebody returns, where and there is a process. It's a feast where they're responsible and accountable for their behavior. It's a cleansing feast from where
Mhm.
I'm from.
Mhm.
I think the one that comes closest to it might be Hollow Water in northern Manitoba, where they took responsibility for their behaviors in families. And really, they're the only community that I know of that that confronted incest. And
Oh.
because sexual abuse had been normalized, and I would say they're the leading community in the nation.
Mm.
And they had a process for reintegration.
Mhm.
So we already have how to do it in our culture.
Right, right.
It's
Yeah.
that um, when your brain has been changed by intergenerational trauma, really that's where we need to be focusing most of our attention. And for some
Right.
time, it's been economic development.
Yeah. Mhm.
And you know, money doesn't heal. It can help get access to great services, but
Right,
yeah,
right.
yeah.
So it's more helping people to understand and to heal the damage, the neurological damage, as well as the emotional and yeah.
Spiritual, yeah, the
Right,
soul harm, yeah, to the
right.
collective soul, really. Yeah,
Mhm.
and I think that we're awaking to that fact. But when we move out of this decolonization stage, I think that then we're going to be really questioning in a good way. It's my prayer in a good way, um, how to stand up and be in relationship with without blaming or judging or criticizing, but just because we are.
Mm.
And yeah, because we can't change the past.
Right.
None of us can. We just have to look at good and bad medicine and to know that a curse cannot be reversed.
Mhm.
It can only be transformed.
Mhm.
And that's a spiritual act. So when we look at the language that's being used today, um, I think we're still in the anger stage
Right.
collectively. Yeah.
Mhm. And it's hard to work with that because it feels like the anger is so justified. There's been such great harm done, and yet
Mm,
the anger isn't necessarily anger can be really helpful and can be really toxic. So
right.
it's difficult to work with.
Right. We need it just to make right whatever is wrong, you know.
Mm, mhm.
And then it's done its work.
Ah, right. So
And then
not
we let it go and we move
right.
on. Yeah. So when I'm continuously going into anger, then what am I really experiencing here? Oh, this is resentment, or
Mm,
oh, this is hatred.
mhm.
Um, so that's my experience with anger. And really, I didn't know the difference between anger and rage when I was in my mid 30s.
Mm, mhm.
I thought rage was anger.
Ah, mhm.
It's taken, yeah, it took some time at the Meadows to learn, oh, w- you mean anger's something good?
Right, right. It's not gonna
Really?
burn the whole place down. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah.
right.
Uh, well, and then with so many people in freeze or dissociating, then anger can be a catalyst to wake up too and come back to life.
Right. Right. It's the fight response
Hmm. Right.
or flight, you know,
Hmm.
whatever I need to do in the moment.
Right.
But what we need to do is let those impulses pass through what I need to do so I can be present to say, what is it that needs to be done or said here? Or how do I hold silence as I'm with this?
Uh-huh. Hmm.
Yeah.
Right.
And I would say it's really only ceremony and prayer that has helped me to get here. You know, neurofeedback has been amazing.
Hmm.
The SE training has been great. Going through the Meadows program was wonderful, you know.
Hmm.
But then it all comes down to me, doesn't it?
Yeah.
I'm the one that's got to do it.
Right. Right.
I'm the
And
one that has to choose life.
yeah. Yeah. And having people to do that in community with
Yes.
really makes it a lot more possible. And
Yes.
yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, it's critical.
And so the shame that comes along with um, a lot of what we've done or a lot of what's been done to us. Is there anything that you would say about that? How you work with releasing shame?
I think first it's to have the awareness that I'm in it,
Mhm.
and then um, a willingness to understand and to explore, to let it lead me
Mhm.
to what it is I need to know. And um, once it's taken me there, then what's my responsibility? How am I to be accountable?
Mhm.
Is this mine? Is this my shame? Or is this intergenerational shame? Is
Huh.
this the shame that society has put on me?
Mhm.
Um, yeah, this is about the inquiry that needs to happen, and really not so much with the limitation of my small mind, but
Mm.
with from my heart, with a desire and an intention to become a more loving and kind person, to live, you know,
Right. Right.
and to live well and peacefully.
Mhm.
So I as a therapist and in my own life, that's essentially the pathway, and then to see how often it reoccurs. And so instead of going, oh, I didn't do it right, or here it is again, or um, it's okay. What do I do? Oh, I inhale for count of 4, I hold for a count of 5, and I exhale for 6.
Exactly. It can be that simple to reset things. Yeah. Yeah.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah. Mhm.
But
Yeah. Oh,
I
go ahead.
think shame is a spiritual energy force often. No, um, they used to call it toxic shame. That used to be the language for it. Or
Right.
um, and then there's the healthy, which is about being embarrassed because I made a mistake. You know,
Right.
I tripped, or I didn't do something right, or
Right.
yeah. So
Yeah. Well, and that the experience as a child of there's something wrong, and then we turn that against ourselves, and we develop that really core deficiency beliefs, and that there's something really wrong with us.
right,
That's just devastating, and children don't have any other way to see it. We don't know that it's not
yes,
right.
right, and being egocentric, right?
Right, yeah, which children are very egocentric.
Yes,
Mostly
yeah.
adults too, but yeah, yeah, yeah,
But yes, and into innocent and sacred.
yes. Mhm,
Yeah, those things as well.
mhm, mhm.
But I
And are
think
you patient?
patience is so important.
Yeah. Mhm. Are you seeing any of this work? Is this what's happening in treatment centers as well, or has that
Not yet,
not yet?
not yet. So we have the National Native Drug and Alcohol Program, it's NADAP, and that was created by visionary leaders back in, I think, the 80s. It's been in existence for quite some time, and they're drug and alcohol workers in community.
Mhm.
And I think it's going to be important that we get this education along with neurofeedback and acupressure and all of the modalities that help to heal intergenerational developmental complex PTSD.
Right.
And we're not there yet.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Right. Yeah, it's very important work.
it is. It is.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
it's an honor to be able to do it. You know, First Nations Health Authority gives me this opportunity to do the work I'm doing.
Hmm.
So,
Hmm. So, do you have any kind of final thoughts for what you might want someone to know who's either Indigenous or not, but who's struggling with trauma and healing and kind of
mm,
on this path? What would you say?
mm. I would say that you're called to exist in this life, that there's a sacred line that goes from your deep innermost being out to the great unknown. And that great unknown is complete goodness.
Mm.
It's when we look at attachment, it's where there's safety and protection and love, and that this life is truly a good life to live.
Mm. Oh, that's beautiful.
Mm.
Hmm. Well, thank you very much.
Yes, it was good to meet you, Lynn.
It's very good to meet you too.
Thank you for this opportunity.
Oh, you're very welcome. Hello, this is Lynn Fraser with the Kiloby Center Radical Recovery Summit. We are so excited to bring you the lineup for January 10th to 19th, 2020. Go to radicalrecoverysummit.com to see the new headliners for 2020 and to sign up. You can watch free January 10th to 19th or buy an all access pass.